Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Illinois Farm Credit. We're going to start off first with just a look back from August 1st up until the 6th of October, as I'm recording this, at our precipitation ranks by climate district. Beginning in August, the Bermuda High, which is our normal pump of moisture out of the south, began to drift off, and the entire atmosphere lost its momentum, and we started to watch significant drought conditions build across much of Illinois. Now, a lot of this happened in August, and we were still benefiting from the pretty heavy rains we saw in the month of July. But overall, as this began to settle in, we started to watch yield peel back and some pretty serious drought conditions build in. Now, I want to show you some new tools I've been working on for you, and it's because of the partnerships I have with Farm Credit Illinois that I can do this. So head over to agweather.com, ag-wx.com, click on local weather. And when you do that, I'm near Champaign, so let's just type in Champaign, Illinois. If I could type it there we go. Click on it and click submit. Now it's going to go hit all of our databases, and it's going to give us some very important statistics. So once it's done hitting all these, take a look. We are nearly 10 inches below normal on rainfall, 21.43 in Champaign. You can do this for any location. You can drop a pin. You can do whatever you want. But take a look at our precipitation graph, much below normal. And right here, this is the beginning of August, we had these plateaus that just kept robbing us of moisture. Now, one thing to look at as I slide over here is to look at the water budget. Now, this accounts for the evaporative process. And I know I just told you that we're about almost 10 inches off from the start of the year, but when you include evaporation, that's more like 15 inches below normal. So we've watched our soil moisture, which looked pretty good at the end of August. Take a look at that. Okay, that was, the end of July, beginning of August, to now look like this as we get into the first week of October. The drought situation, of course, has gotten worse. If you look at the drought monitor, it's up 25% in total area for the continental United States over the last 9 weeks, and this is where we've watched the drought continue to build. Now, I focused in on the Corn Belt, but take a look at the Delta and the Mid-South. Take a look at the Southeast, all the way up the East Coast. The Mississippi River, by the way, is 6.36 feet below low stage as of the morning of October the 6th. Now, we're wondering, when does the rain return? And there's a little system that's trying to bring a front through us. Did you see it when we were back here on the local forecast? You can see some of the rain in and around this area trying to work its way through, but I'm afraid we're going to leapfrog this area and not be able to bring in much precipitation. And some of our forecasts over the next 7 days suggest maybe some in northern Illinois, but missing that I-72 to I-70 corridor and then hitting parts of the Mid-South over in Kentucky, Tennessee much better. The risk here is that if we miss this, we may go another several days without getting meaningful rainfall chances. And when I kind of diagnosed the rest of the country and just said, all right, show me the next 10 days, what's the probability of grabbing another half inch of rain? You can see that stretching from Texas all the way to central Illinois, we've got relatively high probabilities, 50 to almost 90% chance of staying under a half of an inch. And it gets concerning because at some point this drier pocket is going to have to break down. And we've had so much problem with such a dry harvest that there were numerous field fires in Illinois over the last few days. In fact, the last couple of weeks. Now, harvest has been fast, and is anything going to slow it down? Well, the map I just drew on is the week 2 forecast from the ECMWF, and there is something shifting. We're beginning to get more of these troughs that have hung off the West Coast to try to move their way across the country. And there is something out there to be looking at when we get into that third week of October. Okay, but until then, the chances are just, they're not good, if that's the best way to put it for you. I'm talking about rain. Now, we'll come back to temperatures in a minute, but take a look at this. Since August 1st, the momentum of the atmosphere has dropped well below average and has just stayed there. That's what all of this color shading is across the Northern Hemisphere. But some of our forecast models, this one is produced at Northern Illinois University, is looking at a certain model called the CFS-V2 and processing it for what that momentum is going to do. And it appears that it's going to come out of the basement in the third week of the month and start to regain some normalcy, back to normal momentum. Now, what does that mean? The more we can get the atmosphere moving, okay, the more we get rid of these big stuck ridges and start to get into more of a normal cadence of troughs, followed by ridges rather than just stuck ridges, right? Another thing I like to look at is called the global wind oscillation. Now, here's it in a nutshell. That's the zero line. If you're down here, we're looking at the Better chance for the northern hemisphere to get meridional north-south flow into big ridges. But look at the forecast. See how it's starting to come back up. And that would suggest going into the end of this month and the start of November, things are going to be shifting around. Now take a look. There's another component to this. Right now, as we look over into Russia, there is actually increased snowpack compared to average there. An early buildup of snowpack in October tends to get the jet moving. And take a look. That's where we're talking about the snow. And look to the south of it. The poleward temperature gradient is increasing, and therefore so are the winds. That's what drives the jet stream. It's the poleward temperature gradient. You have to make it large. We've not had good flow over North America because there's been no good poleward temperature gradient. Now, all of this is to say, and if you can't hear the excitement in my voice, all of this is to say, as we progress toward the end of the month, our chances of bringing in rainfall begin to improve through much of the Midwest. The last holdout will be here. Now you're going, well, what about the tropics? Can the tropics send anything? Sure. But with the Bermuda High way off the coast, most tropical activity is making the turn before ever getting to the East Coast United States. And we have yet to see something substantial brewing out of the Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, or Central America. Now, there's something down there I'm watching right now, but it's not a slam dunk on a forecast. But my idea here is that we're beginning to see improvements. Now, until then, if we're drier, we do need to be paying attention to the winds. And as I'm watching late this week, getting into this weekend, there seems to be, especially late this weekend into early next week, an increase of winds coming across the midsection of the country on another front. And I want to be aware that these winds, while not currently forecast for Illinois, we are still going to be able to get winds in the 20 to 30 mile an hour range, suggesting if we miss the rain, we're going to be talking about more field fire risk here. Temperature-wise, real quick, this is where we've been since September the 10th. Remember how cool the beginning of September was? Well, that all ended on September the 10th, and most of the state is having a top 3 warmest such time period of September 10 to October 6th on record. But as you know, if you're getting to watch this right away, there was a front that came through on October the 6th and started to knock our temperatures back. But we're not in any fear of a frost anytime soon. In fact, over the next 7 days, if there's frost risk, you can see it here in gray. What are the temperatures doing? Well, here's the maximum temperatures on Monday the 6th as I'm recording this. But look at Tuesday. Temperature's starting to come down. That's Wednesday. Look at that. That's going to feel amazing. That's about average for this time of year. We then get into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There's a rebound. But our rebounds now are happening where they get back up to the upper 70s, maybe touching 80, not going back up into the 90s where we've seen these temperatures for a while. But overall, until that pattern breaks down, this is the next 5 days, getting out to day 5 through 10. And there it is again, cool west, warm in the central U.S., and that pattern doesn't really start to edge its way toward the east and get out of here until we get to that third week of the month. And that's why some of the forecasts out there at the end of October are beginning to show more normal seasonal temperatures returning, kind of like what we saw a year ago. Now tuck that away in the back of your mind as I start to wrap this up. We do have a La Nina. We are not expecting it to be strong. It's expected to peak just in this weak territory and then rapidly fade. But it's there and it's going. What's interesting about that La Nina is that if you look at the seasonal forecasts, it suggests that the drought monitor is going to look very different by the time we finish March and start April if we end up getting a very active Ohio River Valley storm track. Now, that is a common La Nina scenario. Last year, did it happen with the weak La Nina? Nope, it did not look like this. But there is a little bit better evidence this year that maybe this November to January outlook and then this January to March outlook could have a better chance at verifying. It's speculative, but I wanted you to see it. So where are we going? Well, you know what's interesting? The closest analog to 2025 right now is 2024. Look at the ocean temperatures back in early October 2024 versus 2025, and I've highlighted 5 areas to show you the similarities. Now, just you can pause it and read it if you want, but every one of the areas that I put a number over looks very similar to what it did last October. And that's got us thinking, well, what happened in November, December? Well, just as I told you, we're going to see a pattern shift. And there's better chances of reviving moisture in November and December here. But until we get that poleward temperature gradient thing figured out, the chances of us staying more mild are in the cards. In other words, not an early, consistent Arctic plunge into November or December. At least that's what didn't happen. At least that's what happened last year, or didn't happen if you want to talk about the cold air arriving. Remember when the cold air did arrive? It was in January and February. We were a bit drier. We were in a bit of a snow drought, but we had major Arctic blasts coming out of, the Arctic through Canada. And there's just a shot that that's what we see again this year. I want you to be aware of that. So you've seen the models. Now you've seen history. I think we have a lot to be decided here, but I think what's most important is just pay attention to the next 2 weeks and take advantage of the tools that I have on agweather.com. You can go out there and see a written summary of the forecast or the cards if you like those, or you can even compare the models to see when they're trying to make precipitation. That's where you can go after you've seen and digested this video to monitor these things going forward. Now, there's another place in the world that we need to watch very carefully as well, and it is South America. In Mato Grosso, they are on a fast planting pace. You see, they had good rains about the third week of September, and they started planting quickly as the soil conditions became, ideal. They're at 15% planted, and I expect by October 10th they're going to be almost at 30% planted because there's a bit of a drier forecast in the next 7 days that's going to let them get going. But the models are in disagreement as to what happens after those 7 days. You see, the European model says wetter, and if this happens, it is going to push this planting season along with the accelerator pressed all the way to the floor. The GFS throws the brakes on things. In fact, it not only throws the brakes on things toward the end of October, keeping it drier, but it tries to keep it that way all the way through mid-November. The European model is the opposite. It is wetter. We've got a bit of a model battle going on here, but we do know they have planted more acres. They know they have a big jump on the planting season so far, and unless there's some sort of a weather problem coming out of South America, boy, I tell you something, they're going to have a huge crop. Now, my last comment about South America. When there is a La Nina, we tend to be drier south and wetter north, and the battleground tends to be southern Brazil. That is going to be the area to watch most carefully going into their growing season to possibly have wildly swinging precipitation patterns. That, and you better watch Argentina. They do run the risk of having drought during years where there is a La Nina. But in the meantime, that's getting far ahead. In the meantime, I think the European model will win out in the forecast for the remainder of October. And I've gone on way too long, but I had a lot I wanted to cover here today. So you all take care. We'll talk again soon. Check out ag-wx.com to get those latest weather updates. And again, it's partnerships like I have with Farm Credit Illinois that we can put that site out there for you to use. I appreciate it. Have a good one. Thanks.